Well, hello and welcome to HTML and XHTML video number 2, and as you can see by the title, it is all about links. Links are a very important part of the web, linking documents around from one website to another, as you're no doubt very familiar with. And in this video we're going to demonstrate the creation of many different kinds of links. And here we highlight some of the main objectives of this video. First of all, the A tag in HTML is the one that generates the links, and there are several attributes of the A tag that we'll become familiar with in this video in order to control how our links work. Different types of links that we'll be creating include those to other pages within your own site. Of course, you need to have a way of navigating through your own site's pages, and then there are also at times in your website where you may want to reference web pages outside of yours, some reference material, for example, that might be relevant, or a favorite links page, something like that. You also may have a long page of your own and need to have links that work within the page to take you down to one section of the document, for example, that kind of helps the user navigate that document rather than scrolling all around within it. Then there's a couple of other types of links that we'll explore. Links that send mail, or begin at least to initiate a client mail program that would address it automatically to the person you'd want. And a second kind of link that we'll look at here, special kind of link, is that where you're clicking on an image in order to get to another page or place within a page. So those are the different kinds of links that we're going to be exploring. And first of all, we do have some files that you need to get access to in order to follow along with this discussion, and they're shown here. There are 4 HTML documents that you're given already as a starting point. The one that we're going to focus on is this one here, called links.htm. It's the main page that we're going to be working on. Part of the page exists now to help us, and then we're going to build a bunch of links with inside of it. We're also going to link to these other documents so we can get practice in building, a navigation bar. So these documents here, home, photos, and resume, are basically blank documents. They simply have an H1 so that we can identify them when we link to them in the browser. And we also have an image here. This is going to help us when we eventually get to working with images that can be links. As you can see here, this image says top of page and has a little up arrow, and eventually we'll have that in our page at various points so that we can click that image and move ourselves up to the top of the page. Okay, so these files you should have if you want to follow along, and they should be in a folder with the same name as I'm showing here, Video 2 Links. Alright, we're going to next take a look at what the document that we're going to be creating might look like if you completed all of it. We're not actually going to create all of this page as it's showing now, but this is how the page might end up if you were to fully complete it. First of all, we have links to other pages within what might be a personal website. This is the actual favorite links page that we're on right now. So for example, if we click on the photos link, we're linking over to one of those files that we just looked at, photos.htm, and you can see it just has kind of a dummy H1, so we can identify it and then click the back button and come back to our page. And the other links do the same with a fake resume page and a fake home page. Now normally we wouldn't have this even be a link, because it's a little confusing to the average user to see a link to the same page you're on, and they might click it and wonder what's going on. As you can see, it isn't really set up properly anyway. So that link is something that we'll talk about and work with a little bit later. Now, there are also links within the page. This is a favorite links page, and there are different sections. There are HTML resources links, search engine links, general entertainment links, and some shopping links, as well as a way to contact through. This is the email link there. Here we can see we can jump back to the top of the page with those top of page images, And these things will take us down. For example, if we want to look at the search engine links, we click that, and the search engine category comes up as if you had scrolled it yourself to that point. And then the top of the page can bring us back. So it helps us navigate within this page. And then we have all these links out onto the web. For example, if we look at the HTML resource links and we click one of them, the World Wide Web Consortium link, that should take us to their site. The W3C, as they're called, is an important organization that created the standards for HTML, among other things, and so we can come to their site in order to look at reference material or try to validate our HTML pages and things of that nature. And we'll click the back button to come back. So these are the examples of the links that go out to the web. These are the links that go within our site. These are the links that go within our page. Okay, so that gives you a pretty good idea of what we're going for. And now we have to open up our links.html document. And by the way, you did not have access to what I was just looking at. You do have access to a partially created page here, links.html. Let's open that one and see what our starting point is. All right, our starting point is a page that has fewer sections than what we just looked at. We're missing the shopping area and the entertainment area. We're also missing our links across the top because we're going to build them. These aren't even links, only text, and likewise in the areas where the links used to be, the text is there to describe things, but the links aren't there. The email address is here, but it's not a link. So we're going to build all these links onto the page from this point. Let's use the view source to automatically open up Notepad and allow us the ability to make our changes. Okay, so the first thing we're going to work on in this document is the set of links across the top, what would normally be called a navigation bar. And we're going to place that in a paragraph across the line that you see there below the H1. So we're going to start with a P. I'm going to go ahead and close the P, and our paragraph text will go in between. We'll begin by building the text without links. So home will be the first, and then a space after home, and we're going to use this vertical bar key. It's right above the enter key on most keyboards. You have to shift to get it. It looks like a broken vertical bar on the keyboard typically, but it is a solid one when displayed. So home, and then we're putting spaces on either side of home, and then resume, space, vertical bar, space, and then favorite links, space, vertical bar, space, and photos. Whether you want to follow that up with a space or not afterwards doesn't really matter. Let's go ahead and save what we have and take a look in the browser to see what this area now has to offer. We can see what looks like a navigation bar, but these obviously are not links yet. So we have the look, but we don't have the links. Alright, back to Notepad to build links. Okay, remember the page names, the file names, home.html, links.html, photos.html, and resume.html. Those have to be exactly right for our links to work. So here we go now with our A tag. Now we're going to surround each of these with an A tag, beginning A and closing A. Alright, now as you can imagine, that won't be enough to do the job because the browser will not know how to find that page. It makes it look like a link at the beginning, but it doesn't really help the browser to get where we need to go. So we need another aspect to the A tag, and that's the href attribute. Now an attribute helps the browser to somehow know what to do with that tag. And in this case, it's the href that's critical to our A tags. And then we, of course, are doing this in lowercase with an equal sign and then a quoted string for the attribute value always. In this case, we want the name of our page, which, as we just noticed, was home.htm. All right, now this should be a working link at this point. Okay, I believe href stands for hypertext reference, by the way, if you're wondering where that came from. Let's save, and let's go back to our browser, refresh, and we see that we now have the typical default behavior from the browser, which is a blue colored link and underlined, and if we click that, it should work and take us to our dummy home page, which it does. And we click the back button to come back. You always want to test your links after you create them to make sure they work. All right. Now let's do the same for the resume document. It's a simple A tag with an href equals resume.htm, and then a closing A tag after the word resume. By the way, it is important that you not have spaces here inside the A tags. Notice that our spacings are outside of the A tags. Okay, the A tag, of course, begins and ends there, and begins and ends here. And all of our spacing is outside. The reason why is that if you were to put spacing here instead, for example, and not there, you'll end up with a blank space that's underlined in the browser. It looks dumb, unprofessional, and essentially something you want to avoid. Okay, by the way, I have word wrap turned on, which is why we're getting some strange behavior as I add extra characters in here. All right, we should have now two working links. Let's go ahead and create the third. Let's see, the third is favorite links. We won't really need to worry about that at the moment. So let's create our third link on photos. That's an A tag with an href equal photos.htm, and the closing A tag. Now, should the closing A tag go in front of or behind the closing P tag? Hopefully you would answer in front of, because the A tag needs to be nested completely inside the paragraph, right? We don't overlap tags, so that tells us the A tag must end before the P, because the P started before the A. All right, so we now have three working links, hopefully. Let's save and test both our new links. Refresh. And let's try resume. Works. And photos, which works. Now, if yours for some reason isn't working, then what you need to do is come back to your editor, Notepad, and just go character by character comparing yours with mine, because something obviously is not quite right. Or possibly another problem, if you're not getting these links to work, is that you don't have all your files together in the same folder like that. That's critical. They can't be scattered about in different folders, or the browser will have no chance of finding them. It always looks for files in the same folder as the page itself is, so that's why we've kind of put these things and organized them into the same folder. Something to be aware of when you're creating links. Another thing I should mention when we're creating links is we never want to have references to disk drives and things like A colon or D colon or C colon or whatever, because our files may move, and so you just want to have the names, and it'll all be relative to the current page. Even if it gets uploaded to the web, it'll be correct, because they'll all go into the same folder on the web and still be able to be referenced. Okay, now what about the favorite links? Here's my philosophy on that one. As you can see, it's not a link, and that actually kind of helps people to see that that's the page we're on. So I don't see any point in making this a link when it's the page we're on. The only exception to that would be that it might make sense to make it a link for the sake of copying this navigation bar onto those other pages. Once they're all on those pages, then we would remove the link on each page for that particular text, whether it's photos on the photo page or resume on the resume page, so that they'll all basically look like 3 links with one missing to represent the current page. So we have no real motivation in this case because we're not going to go do that work on those other pages right now. All right, let's work on the next step, which would be to create some links for these HTML resources and search engine links that actually go out on the web. So we'll scoot ourselves down there, and we'll come back and work on these. Are eventually going to need to be links down into our document, but we'll come back and work on those later. The next step then is to create links out of the DTs in our definition list. You'll notice that our links are set up in definition lists. They don't need to be, but that was just the style choice that I made as we created these. So the links are going to be the DTs, and the description of the links are the DDs. So each one of those DTs is going to end up being the link that's clickable to get to those pages on the web. So we're going to put A tags right around the text inside the DT. It's important, again, that we don't overlap, so that we're always going immediately after the opening DT with an opening A tag and immediately before the ending DT with the closing A tag. All right, and then of course we need hrefs. Okay, when we do an href on these particular links, it's a little bit more involved because we have to specify the full HTTP address. You cannot simply give the www part, as you might be able to get away with in the browser itself. When you're actually linking, you must give the full URL. And this one's pretty easy. We'll just type it in. It's http://www.w3.org, and close your quote. You must close your quotes or you'll have problems with the link. So W3 stands for World Wide Web. So they're the World Wide Web Consortium. That's their address. Let's try it. So we save, and we go back to our browser to try that one link. Okay, this is what we hope becomes a link when we refresh. You can see that it does. Now let's click it and see if we get where we want to go. Sure enough, we do. This is the W3C World Wide Web Consortium site. If we scroll down, while we're here, we might as well see a few introductory things about them. They have a lot of important information on this site. Here's a section about HTML, another about CSS. They also can validate your CSS. They can validate your HTML. They have other HTML tools, such as HTML Tidy, which can be used to clean up messy HTML if you're trying to, redesign an old site or something. Lots of other important documents, such as the actual specifications of HTML itself. And so a pretty useful site to have a link to, and now you do. All right, we'll come back now and do the same for HTML help and HTML goodies, which are also HTML sites that you might want to check out yourself at some point when you're in need. Let's go down to the second DT in this section and build that link. Now that link's going to be to HTML help, and instead of typing the link in as we did for our first one, let's see another approach, and that would be, I'm going to open a new browser window. Let's say you're not sure of what the web address is. Okay, I'm going to make sure my address toolbar is showing. Here it is. And then I'll type in what I think is the address, www.htmlhelp.com. Okay, that is the correct site. But this is your way then of, rather than putting it into your HTML and trying it, I'm putting it into the browser and trying it. And when I find that it's the correct site, then what I can do is click on that and use Control-C to copy the actual address and then paste that address, now that I know it's correct, into my A tag. Alright, so now I'm going to do a href equals open quote, and then I'm going to do Control V to paste, and I'm pasting that guaranteed correct address rather than having to type it. So that's a nice technique, especially if you're deep within a website and this address is rather long, which, you know, if we were referencing a certain page within that site, the address could get pretty ridiculous in terms of trying to type it. Alright, I need to close my A tag right before the closing DT, and then we can save. By the way, you can save with Control S. Make it faster for you. Come back and let's see if that HTML help link works. It does. By the way, at HTML help, there's reference material on HTML itself, on cascading style sheets or CSS. There's a referenced in different languages even, and some tools. There's an HTML validator. There's a CSS checking device. Lots of other things as well, and there are some links at the bottom, such as ones we're doing, kind of like its own favorite links, and some of those links are to tutorials and some to validators and other frequently asked questions and things. So this is a pretty useful site, and their HTML reference is very good. I recommend it for other reasons that we'll find out later on. At any rate, let's click the back button and come back to our site, and obviously this link works, so we can come back to our HTML and put in our last link in this section, which is to a site called HTML Goodies, another HTML helping site. This one I'm just going to type it in myself. It's a href equals, and then the site is http://www.htmlgoodies.com, close quotes, close the beginning A tag, and then create the closing A tag. Again, I'm in word wrap, so it jumps when it feels like jumping at the end of that line. But as you can see, it looks like we have our opening and closing A tags right inside the DT as we need them. And let's check and see if that works. And then we'll be done with this section. Okay, back to our browser. Refresh. Looks good. Let's click HTML Goodies and see what happens. Sure enough, we get to the HTML Goodies site, and we have some main navigation links here. And this is basically a site that they include a newsletter. If you want to sign up for a newsletter, you can get information about different HTML related or web building issues sent to you, for example. And they have what's called an HTML primer series, where you can get up to speed on some HTML issues. Pretty good. Pretty decent site. Been around for ages, and generally a decent reference. Alright, let's now move to the next section down on search engines. And this we're going to go through pretty quickly. We just have two links in this section, one to Google, one to Dogpile, and we can simply type these in. href equals http://www.google.com, close quote, close opening tag, open the closing tag, /a, close the closing tag, and that's Google. Let's do the same for Dogpile. We can check them both at the same time. href, thank you, equals, again, http://www.dogpile.com. And let's close the Dogpile link. And I have now those two links completed. We can save. And when I come back to the browser, my browser is still at HTML Goodies because I never clicked the back button. So let's come back. By doing so, we basically got a refreshed page. So here's Google, and here's Dogpile, those two links. Click on Google, and it works. Click on Dogpile, and it works. So those are two search engines if you're not familiar with them. Those are awfully useful in their own respects. And that completes this area here where we are doing the links to the outside websites. Okay. One issue that we did not really address at all here is that sometimes you might be thinking that you want to open these websites, the external ones, not the ones to your own pages, but the outside references here, in their own browser window, in a separate browser window. That can be done with another attribute of the A tag called the target attribute. However, using target has been discouraged by the W3C, and it actually would keep your document from being valid if you're trying to do it in the strictest sense. So we're not going to go through those motions here, but you'll certainly see it out there on the web. It's a separate attribute in the A tag called target. You can look that up somewhere if you're interested, although there are other ways to do that in a more valid way using JavaScript, and that's the preferred way at this point in time. But enough of that. Let's move now to create our contact link. This would be an email link down at the bottom. Okay, right now a generic email address to Joe Student is js@wherever.com. That's displaying on the page, and we can see that down here at the very bottom of the page. It's not clickable, doesn't do anything, it just shows the person your email address. What we want to do is create a mail to or email link out of it. Okay, for whatever reason, my mistake, I actually seem to have a closing A tag there, which should not be there. So I'm taking that out. And now we'll put the A tags back in around it. So here's my opening A tag. I won't put the href in there yet. And here's my closing A tag. Notice that I'm putting the closing A tag right back where it was a minute ago, which is in front of the period and the closing P tag. You might be wondering why in front of the period and not just in front of the closing P. Well, I don't want the period to be part of the link because the period is not part of the email address that's being linked. So it makes sense to put, just like we put the spacing outside when we were creating our nav bar, we put punctuation like periods and commas typically outside of the link itself. Alright, now we need to build the href part. The href attribute looks the same until we get to this point, and we have to specify to the browser that this is not a link that gets us to another document. This is a link that we want to actually initiate the email itself. And so the first part of the link has to look like this, MAILTO : and those 7 characters, having trouble counting there, those 7 characters must be exactly as they are here. No spaces in there, for example. And then the actual address that you want to mail to, which is, in my case, is going to be the same as what's here. In your case, you'll be trying this with your own address. But I'll do js@wherever.com. And then we close our quotes. Alright, so we have an href that looks like this. It tells the browser when this link is clicked, you should activate the default mail program client on this particular computer, wherever the user might be, and address this email to this person so they don't have to fill that out. So it kind of helps them get the email started. You can actually also extend this a little bit so that it knows what the subject of the email will be, and the person doesn't even have to fill that out. We're not going to get into those details, but there's additional capabilities built into this. At any rate, another thing I should point out is this doesn't necessarily have to be an email address. This could just be the person's name, for example. You click on the name and it activates the email program. However, it might be helpful for some people to see the address on the page as well. Another issue I should mention about just putting your email address on pages is that when you do this and you upload it to the web, you are kind of putting yourself in a position of expecting some spam to come your direction, because spam bots, little programs that go around harvesting email addresses off of web pages, do their work behind the scenes, and no doubt at some point you'll be getting additional email as a result. So there are some tricks using some of the special characters. You can kind of make your email work and look okay on the page without actually exposing it to those kinds of spam bot things. So I'm not necessarily recommending that we upload this right now with your email address, but we can certainly do locally here on your own disk and not have to worry about it. At any rate, let's see if it works, and if it does, what it does. Back to the browser. Alright, down at the bottom of the page, you can see it now looks like a link. Now, does it act like it's supposed to? When clicked, as I just did, it should be a delay here, and it will do no doubt something different on yours than it does on mine. First of all, it's asking if we would like to make Outlook Express my default mail client. I'm just going to say no. It probably will go through some other dialog boxes eventually. Hopefully it will open up an email window. There it is. You may get other dialog boxes warning about something or other, depending on how your situation is set up. Okay. Here's the address. So I know at this point that it worked. Okay. There's no point in setting up a subject and typing something and trying to send it. At this point we know the link works. Whether or not this mail program or yours is actually configured properly to send out the mail is another question, and that's not anything the link can do. So I'm just going to close this. This to me is the way of checking it. Get it to that point. Okay? Whatever yours might do, if you can get it to that point right here, you know it works. And at that point you can just close it and say, success. Let's come back and do whatever else needs to be done. Alright, so that's the email link. Now, we still have a couple of types of links that we have not accomplished. One is links within the document, and two is image-based links. Let's do the links within the document. Okay. Notice this paragraph below our navigation bar. It says we have a collection of favorite websites organized into general categories. Check them out. Feel free to contact with suggestions or problems. And here are the categories. And the categories are here, but they're not links. What we want to do is make these individual categories links down into, basically down to these H2s. Let's begin. Let's actually begin at the bottom, since that's the furthest link away. We want to make Contact Me a link that will take us down to this H2 right here. Now to do that, we need to add something down here so the browser knows where we want to go. And we do that these days, at least, with an ID. Now an ID is a way of uniquely identifying that particular element, in this case the H2, with a name that is unique to any other. So in other words, you cannot put another ID in this document with the same name of contact. All right, so I'm going to put the ID of contact there. Now I have a place to reference up here. So now in my link, I'm going to put the A tags around Contact Me, because I want the whole text, these two words, to be underlined in the browser and clickable. Now the href on this one is going to be slightly different than any other ones we've seen so far. And we begin with a pound sign. That's what indicates to the browser that this is going within the page. And we have to exactly match whatever we have named that ID, in this case contact. So make sure whatever you type there matches this. Generally, these should all be lowercase. Your file name should all be lowercase as well, so that you're always typing lowercase in these areas. Alright, let's check out this now and see if it works. If it works, it'll scroll the browser down to that contact area. Refresh. Okay, it's a link. That's a good sign. Now, let's move ourselves up first. Here we are at the top of the document. Now, if I click this, I expect it to scroll myself down. However, notice, this is as far as this document can be scrolled. Alright, because this is at the bottom. So, we can't expect the browser to do anything more than that. When I click it, it scrolls it down. Down as far as it can. Now, if our link is to one of these other, it'll scroll, a little bit more appropriately towards the top. Let's put the other two in there, and then we'll check the behavior. Alright, we need to do these two now for HTML resources. So we're going to have an A when href equals, and I'll just shorten this one to #HTML. We don't have the ID set up yet. Don't forget to do that. And we'll do this one too while we're at it. And the href will be set up to go to #search. Okay, I'm kind of anticipating the IDs that I need to put in. So the first one is HTML. That's going to go right here as the ID in the H2. ID equal HTML. So this link here is set up to go to this spot here. Obviously we're not going very far, only about 4 lines down, but to be consistent we should have these links to every category no matter where they are. Alright, and then search engines is going to get the ID equals search. Notice that the pounds do not go on the IDs. You cannot have the pounds here. The pound sign, I'm talking about the pound signs, those always go in the links. They must go in the links. They can't go in the IDs. So you got to be careful about that. Oftentimes that's a confusing point for people doing these for the first time. Alright, let's check these out now. Refresh. Alright, now all of our categories are links. When we click HTML resources, it scrolls down. Again, it's scrolling down to the bottom of the page. It's probably better if we take our browser window and squeeze it this way so our page grows longer. The reason I'm doing this is so that I can better test to see if this works. Now if I click HTML resources, it takes it up to the top where it's supposed to. And search engines. Well, it went as far as it could. Again, if I squeeze more, a little bit ridiculous, but this is a good way to test. Because now I can tell it must be going to the right place if search engines goes up to the top. Now there's no way I'm going to get contact me up to the top no matter how much I squish this. So there's no real point in trying to test that, but it'll certainly go as far as it can. And we'll just have to assume that it would go to the right spot. Why are we doing this crazy testing? Because we could end up with lots more categories and sections eventually, and we want these links to really go to the right spots. And as we build more, these will become more important. Of course, as our goal here was to kind of keep the user from having to do so much scrolling. Alright, so we have those kinds of links. Now, that takes us down to the last kind of link that we need to do, which is using an image as a link. Okay, now we're going to use, as we saw, let's remind ourselves of where we're going with this. In the page we began with, you can see, first of all, we had many more sections, and so that allowed us to see how these work a little bit better. But also we have this image, top of page, that we saw, and that scrolls us back up to the top. So we need to do a couple things. First of all, we need to place the image on the page in the right places. We need to get it to right align, and we need to make a link out of it so that it gets us back up to the top. So guess what? We're going to need to put another one of those IDs way up here at the top so that when we click this, it'll know to go up to the top, just like it knew to come down to the bottom of these H2s. Alright. By the way, you don't always put IDs on headings, but it made sense for us since we consistently have H2s for those category headings, that's what we targeted in these links. Alright, so let's go down to the first place where we're going to need one of those image links, and that is at the end of the resources section. It's in this area where we have some space here. So right below the closing DL and above the H2 for the next section, we're going to go ahead and put our first instance of the image link. Now we're going to begin by simply doing the image tag itself, which is an IMG tag. And just like an A tag needs an href, an image needs an SRC. And an SRC stands for source and needs to be a file name. And we know we have the image in our folder, so we can reference it directly. It's called back to top.gif. Okay. And this is one of those tags, like a BR or an HR, that doesn't have a closing tag defined in the language. So the correct way to close these off is to put a space and a slash. So that makes our image valid in terms of being an open and closing tag. So you want to do that with your image tag. Alright, we're not done, but we can at least hopefully see that our image is showing up at this point. So back to the browser. We expect down in here we'll see the image. Let's refresh. Okay, there it is. Of course, it doesn't do anything. It's not a link yet, and it's not on the right hand side of the page yet, so we have some things to do there before we're done. Okay, secondly, the next step along the way to getting this to completely work for us would be images should have alternative text to help explain what the image is. So we're going to put an alt attribute in here, and this is just going to be top of page button, we'll call it. So we're trying to describe the image to those who might not be able to see it for one reason or another. For example, they have images turned off in their browser and can't see anything, or they have a physical disability and can't see it, or for whatever reason the server hiccups and doesn't deliver the image, or the image takes a long time to get there, or something like that. So lots of reasons to put alternative text into your image tags. Now, this isn't going to give us any dramatic change, but we will be able to see the difference. When we refresh, if we hold our mouse over the image, we do see the pop-up telling us top of page button. Alright. Screen readers, by the way, will also read out that alternative text to someone who can't see it. Alright, let's continue now. We want to do some more with this. The main thing we need to do is make a link out of it. So let's put A tags around it. And at the end of the line, closing A. And we come back now to do our href. Now our href is going to have to be to an ID up at the top of the document, which we don't yet have, but we can anticipate it and then go create it. And we'll do a # TOP. Okay, so we're going to set up a top ID at the very top of the document in the H1. So don't forget your pound. So we have the closing A tag outside of the image tag. So you can see we have the image tag surrounded by opening and closing A tags. Alright, now let's go to the top of the document. Now you can't put the ID on the HTML tag or body. It doesn't make sense to do that. You want to put it on an element within the body. So on the H1, we'll say ID equals top without a # sign, of course. And let's save. And let's come back to our document and see if that's working for us. Refresh. Okay, notice that the image gets a border around it. That's because it's basically the equivalent of underlining for an image. Let's click it and see if it takes us up to the top. It does. So that looks like it works. By the way, our images are all purple now, and that's because we visited them. Visited links are by default purple in your browser. We can control those colors, by the way, but we're not going to do it now. Let's address some more things with respect to this image. First of all, we want to move this image to the right side of the page. And it's really appropriate to have this image as well as the link inside a paragraph. So I'm going to create a paragraph for it, starting it before the A tag and closing it after the A tag. So it is all surrounded now by a paragraph tag. Now the paragraph can be aligned to the right, and we do that. If we're using old sloppy HTML, we just use the align attribute, but if we're trying to be respectful of current standards, then we do it with a style attribute, and we use a little CSS to move it to the right. We use style equal, and then we use the CSS property called text align. It's text dash align colon, space after the colon is optional, and then the term right, as we are intending to align this image and its link to the right. All right, so that takes care of one issue, which is the alignment issue. Let's save and see what that does. Now that is going to align to the right. It's also going to create a little more space vertically because of the fact that it's in a P tag. P tags create some vertical space, as you might expect a paragraph to do. Alright, there it is. So we have a little bit additional space here, which is fine because this is separating one category from the next. It's actually kind of a nice side benefit. Now when I click this, it still takes us where we want to go. Again, we want to always check that link to make sure it works. The last thing I want to do is remove the border around that image, as I don't find it particularly attractive. So to do that, in the old days we would just use a border attribute and set it to 0, but we're going to use a style element to take care of that. So somewhere in the image tag, I would say maybe after the SRC, before or after the alternate text. I'll put it before. This really doesn't matter what order you put attributes, by the way, but generally speaking it makes sense to do the most important attribute first, and in this case that would be the SRC tag, I would say. So let's do our style attribute right between the existing SRC and alt, and the style is going to look like border colon optional space and then the word none, close quote, to close our style attribute. So always attributes should be separated by a space within the tag. Alright, so there's our style telling the browser to remove the border from the link. The default behavior is to give it that border. We're saying we don't want it, and so when we refresh, that's taken away and we get a little bit more subtle link. Okay, now the only thing we have left to do is to place the same image in the locations at the end of each of the other categories, which means we need 2 more copies of it. Pretty easy though. Now that we've built up this entire paragraph, we can simply copy and paste it because the link's going to the same place up at the top. It's got the styles to align to the right, it's got the border of none, and everything else stays the same. So I'm just going to use Control-C to copy that paragraph, and then we come down to this area below the second section and paste that paragraph in there, clean up the extra spacing if necessary, and then go below the contact section with the third paragraph there. Alright, now when we save, we should see all 3 images, and of course we should double check that it works properly. When I refresh, I can see I have 3 copies now, and the second one works. I can click these to get back down and these to get back up. So that's typical, that no matter where your sections are, at the beginning you have a link down to them, and at the end you have a link back up. Now that's only for large documents. It doesn't make sense to do this for short documents. If I was building this document and I knew that it only had these 3 sections, it wouldn't be worth all this trouble. But if I know that this is going to be quite a bit longer, then it makes good sense to do it. So you've seen quite a variety of different kinds of links in this document. We've tested and created many of them. There's certainly a lot more that you could do with this and other kinds of documents like it, but you got a good taste of a bunch of different kinds of links. One thing we didn't do is an image map. That's something that is more graphically oriented, which we're not going to do here at this